Salutations and welcome to Shauna's Kitchen, where every day is a new day, and today we're making Bierocks. Now, most German Bierocks, which is what I grew up on, my stepmom from Kansas used to make it when I was a kid, and I absolutely loved it, but I didn't really know how to do it, and she did teach me. But I always thought it was a little bland and a little plain. However, my husband agrees with me, so I went ahead and spruced it up, and you can either do the 12 original ingredients, or I'm going to show you how I double my ingredients. And yes, it's a little bit more, but they taste so fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to have a dough, you're going to have your filling, and then you're going to have your garnish. So for the dough, we are going to need 2 cups of water. That is going to be between 105 and 110 degrees, which I've already tempted up here. Something to stir, which I love my chopstick, as most of you know if you've seen my other videos. If you're new here, welcome in. If you have been here before, thanks for stopping by. Next, you're also going to need most of my recipes include 7. This is 14 grams of active dry yeast, which we're going to be blooming into here. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Most people just dump it straight in. I do not. I take a little at a time and I keep swirling until I do it, and I do a slow, steady pour, and then I let it rest for my 10 minutes. So I'm going to do that. While I do that, why don't you go ahead and get out your flour, sugar, salt, and an egg, as well as a 1/4 cup of margarine, not to be confused with my favorite butter. We need to use margarine in this recipe, and it should be room temperature and nice and soft. Your egg also should be whisked up in advance, as well as room temperature. You're also, for the filling, going to need 6 cups of cabbage, which we'll get to that, as well as an onion, a pound of ground beef to 1.5 pounds, depending on how yours is going to cook up by how much fat you use in it, as well as salt and pepper. However, that's the original 12. I'm going to be adding in some additional things, which you can too if you like, which is carrots, the sweet bell peppers, as well as some additional spices, which I will tell you about that later when we get ready to cook up our filling. And then last but not least is that extra 1/4 cup of butter, not to be confused with margarine like we're using in the dough. You're going to use your butter, it'll be melted, and it's going to be a garnish on top of our completed product. So here we go. I am blooming my yeast into my water mixture. I have the 14 grams in, and I just thought you'd like to see how that looks as we just continue to stir. As soon as it's mixed in, looks like that. Leave it on my hand towel. You might have noticed that there is a little towel under here. It's so that it doesn't change the temperature too much. And then I'm going to let it sit for about 5 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 10 minutes. And then as it rests, I see that it's settled. If I see a couple that's still not mixed in, I go ahead and swirl it. Sometimes it's on my chopstick. Today it's not. But then I just kind of dip my cup sideways and do a quick little turn until it's all off and into my mixture. And I don't see any clumps anywhere. At that point, now I'm going to leave it alone. It's still on that 10-minute mark, even though I've used a few seconds of it. I have my hard spatula ready to go. I have an additional spatula in the background as need be. And now is when I'm going to get out 7 cups of flour, which is divided. So here I have 4, and I have 3 already measured in here. And I use the dry method, which is to fluff the flour and scrape off. And then I have a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, as well as my recipe actually calls for 2 teaspoons of salt. However, because I use a pink Himalayan salt, it's a little bit more coarse. You're going to increase that by 1/2 again. So it's actually going to be 2.5 teaspoons. as well as my 1 egg and the 1/4 cup of margarine, which is going to be room temperature. As you can see, it still holds together, but I can squeeze it, but not, it doesn't take too much. Ready to get moving. Now I'm going to go ahead and notice I put my vegetables back in the refrigerator. This is going to be a quick video for you, but for me, this is going to be an all-day experience. So, hey, yeast is ready to go. Give it a quick little stir. I'm going to pour it into the middle like a bowl. Set that aside. Now I went ahead, here's the lid to my bowl. I went ahead and did, like I said, the flour here. This is how I did that. And then I went ahead and put the rest back into here. I added this into the flour mixture that I had already set out. As I showed you this, mixed it around because I know that yeast does not like salt. So the very first thing we're doing is we have our salt in here. Now, one thing I did different today, I realized I normally add my sugar to my warm water and have it dissolved when I add my yeast. This time I did not, and it did not bubble up quite the same, which I'm okay with because I'm literally not making a bread that I want to rise too much. I'm going to be making a dough that has a filling, and it's going to be a bread-like around it. So now that we got this mostly mixed in real quick, next thing we're going to do, it's going to start getting a little bit harder. We're going to go ahead and get our egg in there. And our butter. Now, some people would be like, oh, you should go one at a time. Yes, sometimes I do. Okay. As you can see, most of it's mixed in there. There's a couple of places where my butter is not completely mixed in, and that's all right, and that'd be right there. But we're going to be adding in the rest of this flour that has the salt and the sugar. And I'll bring you back when I have that mixed together and let you see what it looks like. Here you see where I've only used a spatula and I'm just turning around in a circle, continually scraping my glass bowl edge and bringing it together. At one point, it's going to start looking like kind of sticky, or where it has lines in it, excuse me. And at this point is where I'm going to go ahead and set down the spatula, and I'm now going to bring my hands in there and bring it together a little bit more. Alright, so you can see here the dough has pulled together. It's sticky and tacky. I'm going to go ahead at this point and put the lid on it. Here's the extra flour that was on the top from my earlier sifting or measuring. So I'm going to go ahead and let that sit, get cleaned up, and then we're going to let that rise for an hour or 2 hours, depending on humidity, temperature, and everything else that can affect your bread and when you can get back to it. So here I have my 4 cups of the vegetables, the carrots, onion, and the bell pepper. And there's 4 cups. I used my food processor to make it easier on myself. Next thing, I'm getting my cabbage together. I could use a food processor, but that kind of beats it up a little too much for me. I'd rather have it chopped, not shredded. As I cut my cabbage, I go along where the ribs are and cut in between. And do it as I'm cutting it. I don't do it all at once. That way I have the freshest amount as I'm going. Next thing I do is I pull apart the pieces, and I look for anything like that that might have a discoloring, and the first thing that happens is it comes off and goes in the bucket. That looks great. And then when I get to a rib like this, I go ahead and take that off and put it right into the pan over there. That'll get cooked down. And over here, there's another top. Pull the layer apart, and you can see that's got a really big rib. And it's gone. Now that I have the rest of this kind of put together, I'll set this aside if I need it. It's nice and young, crisp. I'll take my pieces and I set back together about the same. And then I'm just going to cut down 1 or 2 centimeters. And then do it the same the other direction. Alright, and take that one out and cut it down a little more. And then I just take, once it's in the bowl, and I kind of go through and I fluff it up a little and pull it apart so that it's not going to rip my bread dough. Look for any other pieces that are really hard. If it's a hard one, it needs to come out. Like that one. Alright, and if you don't separate it and you just kind of mash it all down in there together, what's going to happen is you're going to get a big bite of just the cabbage and not mixed in with the meat in the end. Yes, this is going to cook down, but it's nicer to have it a little bit individualized. It's easier to put your Bierocks together as well as the final taste in the end. Ground beef has been browned, so I'm turning it down. I have out my bigger pot, which now I'm going to put in half of my cabbage. And then half of my vegetables, the other vegetables, carrots, onions, sweet bells. A little bit more cabbage. Now, I'm going to set this over here. And I am going to be putting my ground beef into my bigger pot. I definitely could have used one pot from the beginning, but one, I want to be able to drain a little bit of my fat off, not all of it, but just some of it, as well as be able to use a bigger pan and get my meat browned quicker. In this pan, it would have taken longer. All the burgers on top, there's a little grease left over. As you can see, I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of my carrots, onions, and pepper. And you can see here, there's a big one, missed, and the food processor. All right. And we're going to add in the rest of our cabbage. Been 15 minutes, and as you can see, it's cooked down about halfway. As I'm doing it, I usually use the back of my spatula and just kind of pushing on the cabbage and the carrots so that they're cooking up. Not like pushing hard, just enough. I'll lay this flat. And we are actually going to be sprinkling on the whole thing. And then I'm going to mix the A1 Worcestershire, put it in there. I really do prefer to do it straight into the burger. It does mix better with the vegetables and everything else. Timer is off. It's been 30 minutes. I'm going to move that to the front. As you can see, it's nice and fluffy. I like to, after I've removed it from the burner, I like to just do one more small fluff, going all the way around the edges and making sure I have it, all the juices combined and move to the top. Because gravity works and it'll move it back down. Now, I've been asked, why don't I just cover this and get it done quicker? And the answer to that is by covering it, you're adding more moisture or holding the moisture in instead of letting it dissipate, and then it's going to actually be soupy and not hold up in your dough. As you can see, the dough is definitely rise. This is the top of my bowl. It's all the way there. So this now that this has been fluffed around and folded, it's going to need to sit until it's lukewarm temperature, and then we will be ready to use it. So it's time for the next step. This has had 30 minutes to cool, and it's lukewarm, just barely warm up with my hand above it. I have pulled out 2 of my baking sheets and put parchment paper on them, as well as get out my rolling pin, as you can see here. And here is my dough. And it is time to punch down the dough. So I'm just going to bring it back together. And the next step, what we're going to be doing is making about 20 balls. And I want to actually make them the same size. I'm not very good at eyeballing the amount. So I'm actually going to be, now that I've flattened it out and I set it back down, it's really pretty. I'm going to set it back into my dish. Look at that. Oh, that's gorgeous. And I'm going to set it over here. I'm going to get ready. I'm going to get ready to pull them apart, but I'm going to be weighing them out today. Doesn't have to be too flat. Just going to let my rolling pin do the work. 1, 2. Now mine might be a little bit bigger, so I will take a look. Now notice I'm not getting it on my hands. I could just grab it in there. I do not want to get around the edge. I leave about 2 fingers all the way around. I'm going to flatten it out a little bit. Not hard. And I'm making sure that there's no hard pieces of cabbage on the edge. Now normally I would be adding cheese right now, but I actually do not have cheese. I think we're going to go 3 tablespoons. I think these are a little bigger today. To put this together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the edge and just pull a hair and then set it back down. And then I'm going to take this side and bring it together and squeeze, pinching it together so that it will close. Now some people like to fold it in and do it from there. I literally pinch it completely closed in case you have any kind of liquid liquid or oils that are trapped in your mix. Next thing I'm going to do, real quick, couple things. One is mine, I use my bench scraper, and they are about a 6 by 6. I've just pulled on it so it looks a little bit bigger. I've now doubled. I'm using 4 tablespoons because they're really big, and my dough is doubling quite quick. So, and then here I wanted you to see, when I have one that gets really close to the edge like that, I bring that side in first and pinch it together. That way I know that the grease has not touched the outskirts of where my seal is. Yes, there's a carrot there, but that's not the seal. Alright, so that goes together. Push and roll. If you get a hole like that, you twist it, put some of that dough back on it like that, and then roll it back together. You don't want to get that too thin right there, so you're going to want to flatten out more on your other side when you're getting ready to set it down. Quick. So I've already rolled it out, but when you pick it up off your parchment paper, you're going to find that the bottom side is sticky, and the top, because you'll notice I don't cover my dough once I've made it into my spheres, and that's so that it can stick to your countertop just enough to be able to do the stretch and pull and have it lay out. If you put the drier side down, or you don't do a drying, then what's going to happen is, there's a carrot. What's going to happen, if you dry it outside down, it's going to roll around on your rolling pin, and it's not going to stay where you need it. That's what I was going to say. So I'm on the last one, and I thought I'd like to see how much is left. Oh, that much. There's going to be about a cup left. And remember, the first 3 I only used the 2 tablespoons and not the 4, and that's where I'm going to end up with the extra. However, I had made some tortillas yesterday, so I'm going to actually use the last of this and just heat it up in a tortilla. And then once it's been hot for about 10 minutes on the 350, I'm going to go ahead and bake it in the oven for about 25 minutes. And when they come out nice and hot, we'll have that melted butter ready to go on the top with the Parmesan mixed in on top. But let's take a look inside. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Super soft, moist, bounces back. This is super fantastic. The added extra carrots and bell peppers and other seasonings really does make the difference. Also, make sure that you do leave it in your 25 minutes when they start to get brown, and if they're not quite done, you might see a little bit of discoloring like this, where it wasn't quite level, or it didn't cook quite the same. So this is my ugly duckling, and that's okay. Tastes just the same. If you've liked this video and you think Bierocks might give it a try, go ahead and like, share, subscribe. Give me a comment down below if you give it a try. Generally, I like to have a little bit of cheese in it, but I was out of cheese today, so this is my first without cheese inside. Thank you very much for stopping by. Have a great day. See you next time on Tashana's Kitchen.